For decades, the story sounded almost too perfect to question. America had its golden girl in Maureen McCormick, forever remembered as the radiant Marcia Brady, while another television phenomenon was capturing hearts across the globe in the form of David Cassidy. Together, they represented an era when innocence was carefully packaged, celebrity felt magical, and millions of teenagers believed they truly knew the stars smiling back at them from their television screens. But behind the posters hanging on bedroom walls and the polished magazine covers was another story, one that was never meant to be told. It wasn't a scandal hidden by explosive headlines. It wasn't a forbidden romance designed to shock the public. Instead, it was something quieter and perhaps far more heartbreaking. It was the story of two young people trapped inside lives that no longer belonged to them, trying to find comfort in someone who understood the impossible weight of becoming an icon before adulthood had even begun. For more than 50 years, Maureen chose silence. Rumors came and went. Tabloids filled in the blanks with speculation. Fans built their own versions of what they believed had happened between her and David Cassidy. She rarely corrected anyone. Some memories, she believed, deserved to remain untouched. Now, with decades of perspective behind her, she has finally spoken about the connection they shared. And the truth isn't filled with scandal or sensational revelations. It's a deeply human story about loneliness, pressure, and the hidden cost of becoming everyone's fantasy while quietly losing yourself. To understand why this confession matters today, you have to travel back to a time before either of them became household names. Long before millions knew her as Marcia Brady, Maureen McCormick was simply a bright little girl growing up in Southern California. She possessed an infectious energy that naturally drew attention. Family gatherings often became her first stage, where she entertained relatives with impressions, songs, and playful performances that hinted at remarkable confidence for someone so young. Her parents recognized that spark almost immediately. Commercial auditions soon followed, and before long, she was appearing in television advertisements, gaining valuable experience in front of cameras while most children were still learning multiplication tables. Producers noticed something impossible to teach, a warmth that made audiences instantly comfortable. That rare quality eventually changed her life forever. At only 12 years old, she landed the role that would define an entire generation. When the Brady Bunch premiered in 1969, nobody involved could have predicted the extraordinary cultural impact it would achieve. America was living through turbulent social change, yet each week viewers escaped into a cheerful suburban household where problems always seemed solvable before the closing credits rolled. At the center of that family stood Marcia Brady, beautiful without appearing arrogant, popular without seeming cruel, confident while still vulnerable enough to feel real. Children admired her. Teenagers wanted to be her. Parents welcomed her into their homes every week. Almost overnight, Maureen McCormick stopped being a young actress and became America's ideal daughter. What audiences never witnessed was how dangerous that kind of perfection could become. As the show's popularity exploded, so did the expectations surrounding its cast. Everywhere Maureen went, strangers expected Marcia Brady, not a teenage girl still trying to discover who she really was. She learned quickly that people smiled at the character before they ever saw the person. The distinction slowly disappeared. Interviews became performances. Public appearances demanded endless enthusiasm. Mistakes suddenly felt unacceptable. Growing up is difficult for anyone. Growing up while millions of people believe you represent perfection is something entirely different. The success of the Brady Bunch created opportunities that most young actors only dreamed about. Reunion specials, spin-offs, television appearances, magazine covers, and interviews filled her calendar. Yet every new project seemed to reinforce the same message. No matter what role she accepted, the world still saw Marcia Brady. She desperately wanted to prove she was more than one character. Hollywood, however, had other ideas. The entertainment industry has always struggled to let child stars become adults. Audiences often cling to familiar images, while studios quietly profit from preserving them. Maureen found herself trapped between who she had been and who she hoped to become. She accepted new television roles. She explored different genres. She worked alongside established actors on popular series, determined to show directors there was more beneath the wholesome image that had made her famous. Professionally, she kept moving forward. Emotionally, she was standing still. The pressure slowly accumulated in ways almost nobody recognized. Every appearance required another smile. Every interview repeated the same familiar questions. Every magazine continued selling the fantasy of America's perfect girl. Inside, she felt increasingly disconnected from the person everyone believed they knew. The loneliness became especially confusing because it was invisible. Success surrounded her. Admiration followed her everywhere. Yet genuine understanding became incredibly difficult to find. Ironically, one of the few people capable of understanding exactly what she was experiencing wasn't part of the Brady family at all. He belonged to another television phenomenon that had transformed an ordinary young actor into an international obsession almost overnight. David Cassidy wasn't simply famous. He represented one of the biggest teen idol explosions the entertainment world had ever witnessed. Concert venues overflowed with screaming fans. Airports became impossible to navigate. Hotels required heightened security. Wherever he appeared, chaos followed. To the outside world, his life looked like a dream come true. To someone living inside a remarkably similar dream, it looked painfully familiar. Long before either of them acknowledged it publicly, Maureen and David discovered something unexpected whenever their paths crossed during promotional events and industry gatherings. For the first time in a very long while, they didn't have to explain what fame felt like. They already knew. There was no need for elaborate conversations or dramatic introductions. They recognized something in each other almost immediately, a quiet exhaustion hidden behind carefully rehearsed smiles. Both had become symbols rather than people. Both were expected to project happiness every time a camera appeared, and both understood that the applause never truly drowned out the loneliness. During the early 1970s, Hollywood operated under an entirely different set of rules. Television studios exercised remarkable control over the young stars whose faces generated millions of dollars in advertising and merchandise. Public image wasn't simply encouraged, it was protected at all costs. Teen idols weren't expected to have ordinary lives. They weren't supposed to make mistakes. They certainly weren't supposed to fall in love. The fantasy had to remain intact because fantasy sold records, magazines, and television ratings. If fans believed their favorite celebrity was emotionally available, they stayed invested. The illusion became part of the product. It was a heavy burden for teenagers barely old enough to understand themselves. Whenever Maureen and David found themselves attending the same promotional events, there were photographers waiting outside, reporters eager for headlines, and executives watching every interaction. Every smile could become a magazine cover. Every conversation might become tomorrow's gossip column. Privacy simply didn't exist. Yet within that carefully managed chaos, they found brief moments where the performance stopped. They laughed together. They spoke honestly. For a little while, they weren't America's television sweethearts. They were simply two young people trying to survive lives that had become much bigger than themselves. Years later, reflecting on those memories with remarkable honesty, Maureen admitted something fans had spent decades wondering about. Yes, there had been a genuine connection. Not a publicity stunt. Not a fabricated romance invented by gossip magazines. A real connection. It wasn't measured by how long it lasted, but by what it meant at that particular moment in their lives. She remembered how easily David made her laugh. More importantly, she remembered how safe she felt around someone who understood the strange emotional isolation that accompanied enormous success. That feeling, she explained, was incredibly rare. Most people saw glamorous celebrities living dream lives. David saw another frightened young performer trying to carry expectations no teenager should have been forced to shoulder. And she saw exactly the same thing when she looked at him. It was never about creating headlines. It was about finding one person who truly understood. But understanding alone couldn't overcome the machinery surrounding them. The entertainment industry of that era carefully manufactured innocence. Publicists coordinated appearances. Managers controlled interviews. Studio executives worried constantly about preserving marketability. A relationship between two of television's biggest young stars wasn't viewed as something natural. It was viewed as a potential business problem. If fans believed the fantasy had ended, studios feared the obsession might disappear with it. So silence became the safest choice. Neither of them publicly challenged the system. Instead, they carried those memories quietly while life continued pulling them in different directions. As the years passed, their careers evolved in dramatically different ways, yet both discovered that childhood fame often leaves invisible scars. For Maureen, the transition into adulthood became increasingly painful. The smiling image America adored no longer matched the turmoil she felt inside. When the Brady Bunch ended, many assumed her future would be effortless. Instead, the protective structure that had defined her adolescence disappeared almost overnight. Suddenly, she wasn't reporting to the familiar Brady set every week. There was no longer a television family surrounding her. No predictable routine. No comforting certainty. Only Hollywood, with all its temptations, disappointments, and relentless pressure. Like many young performers before her, she struggled to answer a frightening question. Who was she without the role everyone loved? That uncertainty slowly opened the door to destructive habits. What began as experimentation gradually transformed into dependency. Drugs became an escape from anxiety, from self-doubt, from impossible expectations. Cocaine entered her life. Quaaludes followed. Each offered temporary relief while quietly tightening their grip. Professional opportunities began slipping away. Auditions were missed. Commitments became difficult to honor. The career she had worked so hard to build started showing painful cracks. Yet addiction wasn't the only battle taking place behind closed doors. She also fought bulimia. She wrestled with depression. Every morning required tremendous effort simply to maintain the cheerful personality audiences expected whenever she appeared in public. The contrast became exhausting. Television viewers still remembered the confident Marcia Brady. Maureen often saw someone who barely recognized herself. Few people understood just how close she came to losing everything. Ironically, while her own life appeared to be falling apart, David Cassidy was confronting battles strikingly similar to hers. His extraordinary popularity had created unimaginable opportunities, but it had also trapped him inside a relentless cycle of touring, recording, interviews, and public appearances that left little room for an ordinary existence. Millions adored him. Very few actually knew him. Success had made both of them famous beyond imagination. It had also left them searching for something astonishingly simple: peace. Eventually, that peace began arriving for Maureen through someone outside the spotlight. When she married actor Michael Cummings in 1985, she wasn't merely beginning a marriage. She was beginning the difficult process of rebuilding a life. Michael refused to ignore the addictions threatening her future. Instead of enabling destructive behavior, he challenged her to confront it. Recovery wouldn't happen overnight. There would be setbacks, painful conversations, therapy sessions, rehabilitation, and countless moments when giving up would have seemed easier. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something remarkable began to happen. The woman who had spent years trying to escape herself finally decided she wanted to live.